Sardines for 3 days? Why would a doctor recommend that? Let's start by covering the benefits of a sardine. Sardines are so nutritionally dense that you might be surprised to see all the stuff that we've got packed into them. My friend and colleague Judy Cho did one of the best infographics on these sardines. Her infographic shows that it's high in omega-3s and vitamin D and E and the kind of calcium that's super easy for your body to absorb, along with the important minerals that are tucked into these little special fish. Let me just brag on how good those omega-3s are for you. They're good for your brain and your heart and your overall health. By increasing those omega-3s, you decrease the risk of anxiety and depression by about 20%. The more you increase those omega-3s, the less you have of omega-6s sticking around in your body. And I mean sticking around. They cause an inflammatory response when they have no omega-3s to fight against. So keep those omega-3s high and those omega-6s a little lower by eating these small, nutrient-dense fish. As soon as I convince people to eat them, they start pushing back about, what about all the toxins in those fish? Here's the rule, folks. The smaller the fish, the smaller the risk of mercury. When the regulators came up with the guidelines on how much mercury should we be eating, they used one of the most conservative approaches, almost to the point where they make it impossible to have a mercury toxicity. For example, the recommendations are that you would have to eat 800 ounces of salmon per week to get close to that mercury risk. And what that means actually is you would need 1,000-fold times that to actually have a true risk of mercury poisoning. That's 800,000 ounces of salmon. The point is, you would need to eat so many sardines to get a mercury risk that it's not physically possible. The second thing people chirp about is a BPA risk, because inside the can of a sardine is a plastic lining, and indeed there may be a slight amount of BPA in there. I am not worried about that in my diet, but if you are, you can buy the sardines found in a glass jar. All right, so the first reason you should eat sardines is they're so stinking nutritious. But the second reason you should eat them is because it's really hard to overeat sardines. Let me explain. First of all, sardines come in a very convenient prepackaged dose. Yeah, each can is its own serving, and if you're like me, you can eat it right out of the can. The second reason that sardines are really hard to overeat is that they induce satiety. Yeah, when you eat that fatty protein little fish, it surges the fat-based hormones that are in charge of suppressing our appetite. It surges things like cholecystokinin, peptide YY, and your bile production increases. The bile emulsifies the fat and protein in that fish and allows you to absorb it. If you don't produce enough of that bile, you will indeed burp them up, but it gets better each day that you do it. Today's production of bile is linked to how much you produced yesterday. So each day of the challenge, you will get much better with this side effect. By the end of this challenge, your system will be in full force. You'll be better satiated from smaller amounts of food, thanks to your hormones, and you will not be burping them up. So the final reason that I like to brag about these little fish is how well they surge your ketones by the third day of eating them. Yes, we talked about those omega-3s earlier, and indeed they are jam-packed with those omega-3s. Once they're getting emulsified by bile and absorbed better, turn into ketones. And a wave of ketones shows up by the third day. When I'm trying to give that same euphoric feeling, or said another way, when I'm trying to give a metabolic workout to my patients that aren't so healthy, I use sardines. And by the third day, their ketones are the highest they've seen them in months, and their blood sugars are the lowest. Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. How do you actually do this? For starters, you'll hear me talk about this as calling it a sardine fast. It's not technically a fast. A fast is when you have salt and water only. So unlike a fast, where people usually start the timer when they're done eating the last meal, I don't start the sardine challenge until you have the first bite of sardines. I also don't let you end it without eating the last can of sardines at the 72nd hour.